see you. Good.
Right, the floor is yours. I will shut my screen off. And
you're leaving us. No, don't leave us. You're still. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all, and you can see that as well. And so the title of today's teaching is how to transform cultural relations in your organization. Okay, so we will begin to work through some pretty exciting things. You know, this has been a question that I've been working with for over 20 years. You know, how do we actually transform a culture? What does that even mean? So the first thing I always ask myself, if I'm starting to talk about cultural transformation, first of all, we have to understand what transformation is, and then we have to understand what culture is, and we start putting those pieces together. So I want to kind of just work through a few things here for you. So what is transformation? Not just cultural transformation, but actually what is transformation? So let's take a look. You can be able to see this on a video here. I love the Transformer toys, all right? So just watch. I'll get the sound down here, and then we'll just make a couple of observations here. So that is transformation. That's why they call them Transformer toys, right? Check another one out here. So we have some lessons that are true about transformation, and so here's the first one, and that is that transformation uses existing pieces, right? It doesn't just throw away everything and start over. Transformation involves using the existing pieces. A lot of times when we have a quote-unquote turnaround artist come into an organization, one of the first things they do is they start getting rid of employees and staff and downsizing, and they're getting rid of the existing pieces. But real transformation happens when you actually repurpose and resize the existing pieces. Okay, so that's the first lesson that we can see from these transformer toys. Here's the second one, and that is that transformation changes appearance. So everything about an entity or an organization or even a person who is transformed looks different, okay? It looks different. And the third thing that we can gather from just watching a transformer toy is that transformation is a process. It doesn't just happen. There's a specific movement and sequence of movements that happen to get us to transformation, okay? So we'll put that together in just a little bit here. So in transformation, you can see this on the slide there. In transformation, an organization or a department shifts from being one thing to another. In mathematics, there are actually 4 different types of transformation. So I won't go into that kind of detail, but there's an actual shift that we move from being one thing to being another thing. So what was no longer is. It's different. Now remember, we're talking about cultural transformation here. So true cultural transformation, it requires that all people and elements of the culture be transformed. So this isn't just some tweaking. This is transformation, okay? So from a young age, I began to have this yearning for transformation because I was raised in this very dysfunctional, very painful environment. My father, you can see on the screen there, was one of 27 children from the mountains of Puerto Rico, and my mother was an orphan from Kentucky. I mean, I am literally a Puerto Rican hillbilly, okay? And if you've heard me speak before, then you've heard me say that. But I had this great yearning internal for transformation because, you know, our family just didn't need some tweaks. I mean, we needed literal transformation to change it from the painful state it was in to something so much better. And that really kind of got me personally on a path of, you know, how do we master culture? How do we create real, deep, meaningful, sustainable cultural transformation, not only in our personal lives, but in our organizations and in our communities, right? So I want to share with you 3 cultural truths. Okay, and again, we're setting the foundation of how we specifically can create a transformation of culture within any organization or any department or even within any community. Okay, so here's the first truth. until we transform our cultural relationships, we'll never transform our cultural realities. Okay, this is really important because a lot of people make this mistake. Okay, a lot of times we're focusing on the cultural realities, which are typically the symptoms of cultural dysfunction. We say, well, we need to change that. So we attempt to do that in many different ways. We'll kind of get into that in a little bit. But here's the reality. Until we transform our cultural relationships, we'll never be able to transform our cultural realities, okay? So the cultural realities are simply the outgrowth of deeper issues in our cultural relationships. Now, a lot of companies will try to policy some sort of transformation, but it doesn't work, and you'll kind of get this in just a minute here, okay? Cultural truth number 2, and that is that leaders must first experience internal transformation before they can lead external transformation. I see a lot of leaders with really, really good intentions, who they themselves had really not developed the cultural health or skill to be able to lead a culturally healthy organization. Okay? So leaders must first experience internal transformation before they can lead external transformation. And cultural dysfunction is simply the outcome of cultures that are led by culturally unskilled or unhealthy leaders. And the third cultural truth is this, that the cultural health of any organization or community is determined by the cultural health of its team members or citizens. So the parts make the whole, and it's impossible to policy culture. And the reason is because people create culture, not policies. So a lot of times, well-intentioned leaders will sit together in a room and they'll create policies for everyone in the organization, which are kind of like the framework to try to get people to behave in certain ways within the organization. But those policies create no internal change because they're effective from the external. The reality is that when we get to a point where we transform the cultural relationships, and the people are freed then in their relationships to create culture that is healthy, because only culturally healthy people will create a culturally healthy environment, which of course in our world is the organization or sometimes a community. Okay? So here's the cultural truth recap. Number 1, cultural relationships must be transformed to transform cultural realities. That's first. Number 2, leaders must first experience internal transformation before they can lead external transformation. And number 3, the cultural health of the team members determines the cultural health of the team. Okay? So it's a little bit about transformation. Now, let's talk a little bit about culture. Okay? We can't transform culture if we don't really know what culture is. Okay, so we have to kind of take a look and see, what is culture? All right, so let's take a look at that. The first thing that every culture has, okay, every culture has beliefs. That's the first thing about culture. Let me get that slide up here. Hold on a second. So we've got to get here, beliefs. Every culture has beliefs. The second thing that every culture has are norms, okay? And these are the things that are expected in a culture or within a society. So we have beliefs and we have norms and we have values. These are the things that are important to us, okay? And then we have symbols. And then we have language, okay? So we have beliefs, norms, values, symbols, language. And those 5 things make up culture. And if you look at that, what you recognize is that all of us, to some degree, are managing multiple cultures every day, right? Beliefs, norms, values, symbols, and language. Now, why is that important? Because cultural transformation happens when those 5 things are actually transformed. And those 5 things can only be transformed when we've transformed our relationships. So cultural transformation happens when how we think about one another, or the values that we share together, or the expectations we have of one another, or the symbols that we share that bind us together, right? And how we speak with one another are meaningfully, positively transformed. That's cultural transformation. Okay? So cultural transformation is not a new set of policies. It's not a new set of rules. It's not a new set of frameworks. Cultural transformation happens at the root. It happens with the people. Those cultural relationships are transformed, and people begin to think differently about each other. They start sharing common values together that are created together, right? They develop expectations or norms for one another. They share common symbols that will bind them together, and they learn to speak with one another in ways that are culturally endearing, okay? So the first thing that we have to do to create a culturally healthy and skilled leaders is to move those leaders to cultural health and skill so that they then are qualified or equipped to create the cultural environment in which all of the other people can thrive together, okay? So you can see that. So the first order of business is always, in any organization, the first thing that we need to do in any organization is to develop culturally healthy and skilled leaders, because only culturally healthy and skilled leaders are qualified or equipped to create the cultural environment, which is the purpose of leadership, right? The purpose of a leader is to create the environment in which other people can thrive, okay? As it relates to cultural leadership, it's to create the cultural environment in which people of diverse cultures and multiple backgrounds can thrive together, okay? So one of the things that we have done through the Cultural Mastery Division here at Bilingual America is to begin to measure the cultural health and skill of leaders.